Good evening, everyone. Welcome, Prairie View students. We're so excited to have you this evening. My name is Ivana Jackson. I have the privilege of serving as the internX manager. internX is an initiative designed to support diverse talent with on-ramps to jobs of the 21st century. And Prairie View is a unique partner, and we're so excited about the opportunity to support Prairie View students with internships, but also career readiness training, which is what we're doing tonight. I couldn't do the work that I do with internX without a team of engineers that have the passion and the power to make the platform work. I'm joined by one of my colleagues tonight, and I'll let him do his introductions.
Hey everybody, my name is Jeff Nelson, and it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I am the tech lead for internX, which means that I manage the engineering team, and we build out, maintain, and improve the internX platform. We also work with all of our partners, students, employers, universities, and collaborators to make sure that everyone can use the platform efficiently, using any custom features they need or custom integrations or support, anything that they need, we handle that. In addition to my work at internX, I'm also an entrepreneur. I founded a couple of different companies. Most prominently, I am the co-founder and chief technology officer of Blavity, which puts on Afrotech, and we'll be excited to have some of you all attend Afrotech this year. We'll have more information about that as well.
Thanks, Jeff, for the introductions. We've recruited a dynamic panel for an engaging conversation. So now let's bring the panel to the stage. Welcome, panelists. What we'll have you do is just do brief introductions, your name, the institution that you graduated from, and what you're currently doing in your career. We can start with Anthony.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Anthony Davis Jr. I am a 2016 graduate of Morehouse College, where I've studied English, which I'm not using at all these days. As of now, I am working in the political sphere. I work as a political organizer for political campaigns.
And we'll have Anthony talk to you a little later about how he transitioned from English into the political sphere. Now we'll have Morgan do introductions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan Toomer. I'm a 2019 graduate of Spelman College. I was a sociology major, which I am also not using right now. I am a labor and delivery nurse at Northside Hospital in Atlanta.
Thanks, Morgan. Morgan will also be sharing her journey, how she transitioned from college to career. And last but not least, we'll have Lauren do introductions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Lewis. I'm a 2020 graduate of Spelman College, where I majored in sociology, and I'm currently a Master of Science in Management student at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C.
All right, so we have a dynamic panel. What we want to do first is kind of do some icebreakers so that the students can get to know you a little more and how you made your transition from college to career. So the first question I have is, when you were in college, did you know exactly what you wanted to do? And if not, how did you get to where you are today? We can start with Morgan.
So when I was at Spelman, I had an idea that I wanted to go into healthcare, and I started out as a biology major. What I learned at Spelman is that you don't have to be a biology or a chemistry or a physics major to go into the healthcare industry. So I changed my major to sociology, and it gave me a broad view of what I wanted to do, because I was able to focus on nursing through sociology. So a lot of my thesis papers and my research was focused on nursing. I went through several different career paths, physical therapy. I wanted to be a doctor at a certain point. But I decided on nursing because I wanted a more hands-on approach to being in the healthcare industry. I think Spelman really taught me that there are different avenues to becoming a worker in the healthcare industry, and I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you, Morgan. We'll then go to Anthony to talk to us about did he know what he wanted to do when he was in school, and then how he made the transition from college to career.
Thanks. So when I got to Morehouse as a freshman, I came as an English major, and I wanted to go into sports journalism. That was my dream, was to be a sports journalist, like covering the NBA ideally. In all 4 years of college, and we'll talk about this more later, I did do some internships in the field. But upon graduating, was not able to find a job in the field and kind of was just looking for a job. And I ended up having a friend, a fellow Morehouse alum, actually offer me a job to come on board to help him out at the NAACP's national office in Baltimore, Maryland. And so like for all of you all, we all know how historic the NAACP is. So that's just like a job opportunity that you don't turn down. But being there and spending so much time there, I spent almost 2 years there. It really grew my love and overall like passion for politics and just organizing. And really, the beauty of being at the NAACP was like getting to see firsthand how you can impact the lives of people who look just like you, and also equip them with skills to also advocate for themselves and create social change in their own communities. And so I quickly like switched my passion and grew really in love with doing this work. And so have continued to do it now for 5 years post grad.
All right, and Lauren, it's your turn. Tell us about your experience and how, if you knew what you wanted to do in school, and then how you made your transition to career.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was any one specific moment during school where I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I started off at Spelman as a history major, and I was on the pre-dental track, so I wanted to eventually become a dentist. But after making my way through my first year and dealing with the coursework, I did not want to take chemistry, so I just knew that wasn't the path for me at the moment. And so that's when I pivoted to sociology, just because I felt like it was more interdisciplinary and would give me more postgraduate options. And I say all that to say, you don't have to, whatever you major in is not exactly what you have to do post-grad. I worked in talent acquisition for a little bit after I graduated college, and also kind of figured out that wasn't something I was interested in. And so that's why I pivoted to my master's program where I'm at now. So it's okay to not know exactly what you want to do in college. I would just implore you all to at least make the effort to figure out what that is.
Thank you, Lauren, so much. I think that's important for our students to remember. So HBCUs are a unique environment. And so the next question is, how did your HBCU prepare you for your career? And we'll start with Lauren, and then we'll go to Anthony.
Yeah, I would say that Spelman definitely did a really great job of preparing me for my career after I graduated. They don't sugarcoat anything with you. They're very blunt and honest about what the corporate world will look like for people after they graduate, especially graduates from HBCUs. And so I definitely really appreciated that, just because when I actually got into corporate America, I wasn't shocked at all, just because they had throughout the years prepared us for what to expect. But I would definitely say, as you all know, it's very on trend right now to attend an HBCU. So definitely make sure that you're using that to your advantage. Companies want to interview you, they want to hire you, they want you applying for the roles, they want all of that. So make sure that you're capitalizing off the opportunities that are made available to HBCU students right now.
Thank you, Lauren. And then we'll have Anthony talk about how he networked his way into the right opportunities.
Yeah, I think one of the beauties of the HBCU experience that is like a lot different from any other college experience is that you end up in, I think for me personally, I ended up learning that there are so many different Black people. I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland, and so right outside the DC area. And so I was always in a predominantly Black school. I was predominantly, all my teams were predominantly Black that I played on. And so like, but we were all from the same place. And so we had a lot of the same interests, a lot of the same upbringings, a lot of just similar experiences. But going to Morehouse was the first time I met like 16-year-old preachers who had been preaching in like the deep South in their family churches like for years at that point. And met so many different people from so many different walks of life who have had a different experience. But I think the big thing is that while you are at your HBCU, understanding that there are so many different people with so many different experiences, really using that as an opportunity to network and get to know people, get to know these different experiences, get to know like what makes this person who they are. Because I think one of the beauties of being at an HBCU is that there's so many people around you who are striving to be great and wanting to do great in their fields. And so I think that it was like a healthy competition and also like motivation to like push you forward in your field, like seeing so many different people who look just like you all working their hardest. And I'll just say, like, to Ivana's point, the value of networking at HBCUs is very important. I think that a lot of times, like, we as HBCU students can be tricked into, like, or, you know, once we graduate, we want to go into corporate America. And that is great. Like, if that is your path, that is awesome. But I think that sometimes we are, like, sold a false dream that there aren't HBCU alums leading in every sector of the world. Literally, our vice president is an HBCU alum. And so the value of networking on a college campus is very important. And knowing that there will be people from your HBCU or from other HBCUs who will be empowered and in a position to hire you. And so just knowing and taking advantage of your networking opportunities while you're on campus is very important.
All right, and just to know, Anthony has received several opportunities after graduation due to his networking.
Every opportunity post grad has come from a Morehouse brother, someone who graduated a few years before me. So the value of the network is very strong.
Before we jump into panel questions directly, I do want to ask everyone just to share briefly about your internship experience. And so everyone's had an internship. What was your first internship experience like? What did you learn and what would you do differently? We can start with Lauren.
So my first internship experience was actually in the summer between my sophomore and junior year of college. I was interning at a small technology company in my hometown as a human resources intern. And it was definitely a really great experience for me. It exposed me to what working in corporate America is like, which was definitely beneficial when I worked full-time after college. I would say for me, if there was something I wish I did differently, it's just wishing that I had advocated for myself more. And so as you all know, when you go into an internship, you do have those set objectives, those set projects that you have to work on, but it's also okay to advocate for yourself throughout the process. So for example, if there's a project that you want to work on, or you see your manager struggling with something, it's okay to offer to help. Or let's say, you know, you have a certain skill in particular that you're really looking to hone. It's okay to ask for a project that will allow you to do so. So that's something I definitely wish I had done more of.
Morgan, you've had a few different internship experiences. Tell us about your first internship experience. What did you learn and what would you do differently?
My very first internship was also in between my sophomore and junior year. I shadowed a nurse practitioner at a clinic in my hometown. I think what I wish I would have done more is speak up for myself so that I got more hands-on experience. I feel like that being my first internship in a career that I think I kind of wanted to go into, I was a little nervous. So I kind of stepped back more than I would like now that I look back on it. So my advice would be when you figure out what you want to do and you get an internship that kind of gives you a view of what that could look like for your future, make sure even if they say no, like, can I try this procedure? Can I help you with this? The worst thing they can say is no. So I wish I would have asked to do more things because that would have given me a better view of what it would be like to be a nurse right now.
And all the students on the line today, there's a trend. Both Morgan and Lauren both started their internships at sophomore year. And so internX is designed to give you that experience as early as your rising sophomore year. And it's because we want you to have that valuable experience over time. So that by the time you graduate, you will have some idea of what exactly you want to do, or at least know what you know that you just don't ever want to do again. Anthony will have you share your first internship experience, what you learned, what you would do different, and then we will turn it over to Jeff.
Yeah, I think Lauren and Morgan both they hit the nail on the head that, like, one of the things for me personally, my first internship was getting to do sports journalism for a professional sports team in Atlanta while I was at Morehouse. And so you know, I was very excited, very, like, just head over heels in love with the opportunity, that I didn't do a good job of advocating for myself and making sure that, like, I made the most of the opportunity as well, and that I was pushing for more opportunity as well. So one thing that I have, like, learned, and I think that is very important for, like, young Black people especially, is that when we are in these spaces, like, we should be gracious, like, we should be grateful that we are in these positions, but also, like, we shouldn't let people take advantage of us as a result of that. Like, one thing that I think is very important is that people will see young Black people and especially in corporate spaces and say like, oh, this person is going to just like, we'll put them on the bench. They'll do what we ask them to, but then otherwise, like, they're just happy to be here. So we don't have to give them anything. But when you show that, like, yes, I am happy to be here, but I also bring value and I also feel as though I could be doing some other things to help the team, that's when they start to respect you a little bit more.
All right, so now that the students have had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the panel, we'll move into the next stage of the program. This is designed to share some tips and tools with students so that you can get prepared for your first internship. Jeff has the first round of questions, so I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, so all of our panelists have done a great job talking about how to succeed in the internship, but I'm really curious about how do you succeed in getting it? That's sort of the first challenge and the first thing to overcome. And Lauren, I am really interested in your story and your background because you've been on both sides of the process, right? So you sophomore year, you applied for that internship, you were a candidate. And then most recently, you had that internship in HR and you started your career working in talent acquisition. You were on the other side, evaluating candidates. So I am curious from your perspective, what should be on every resume? What are some of the basic things that every resume should include? And then can you talk about what students can do to make their resume stand out?
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely relate to being on the other side. At my previous employer, I actually led the entire internship program. So I'm very familiar with reviewing early career candidates' resumes. There are definitely some really important things that you want to keep in mind when you are crafting your resume. And first and foremost is just knowing that your resume speaks for you when you're not in the room. So oftentimes that's going to be the first thing that a recruiter or hiring manager sees about you. So you want to make sure that you're crafting it to be very strong and competitive. With that being said, there's some things that you definitely want to make sure that you're including. Obviously, on the front and the top of your resume, you want to have your name. For some students, if they do have the space to do so, they'll put like a profile or an objective, which is just a couple sentences about who you are and what you're looking to do. And then underneath that, that's usually where students will kind of go into their educational background. So that includes where you went to school, what you majored in, any extracurricular activities you were involved in, as well as your GPA. And then from there, you really want to make sure that you're including the professional experience that you've developed as you've been in school. So make sure that's in reverse chronological order. So if you're not aware of what that means, it's basically just starting with the role that you worked in most recently and then working backwards from there. And so in addition to all of those things, you also want to have some of the leadership activities that you're involved in on campus, as well as any skills that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. And so just also keep in mind that your resume should only be 1 page long, just given the fact that most of us probably haven't developed that much experience for it to be any longer than that. And recruiters also only have a couple seconds to look through your resume. So just make sure that you're keeping that in mind. And if you can tailor your resume to the job that you're applying for, that also helps. I know it can seem like a lot of work, but it really does make the difference in determining whether or not you get that call back. And then in terms of what you can put on your resume to make yourself more competitive, I always tell people that your resume shouldn't be a job description. So it shouldn't just be a list of the responsibilities that you had in your job. You want to make sure that you're showing how you made an impact. And so there's an acronym that I use. It's PAR. It stands for Process, Action, Result. So you want to start off with the process, the action you took, and then the result. And that just really makes it more impactful and can really help recruiters kind of see what impact that you had at your previous company. And then on top of that, if you can quantify any of your achievements or accomplishments, definitely do so, just because it makes it that much greater.
Wow. We just got a master class in how to create a resume. I feel like I need to go update my resume. I mean, that was some good stuff. And I hope everybody was taking notes because those were really some gems. So thank you, Lauren, for that. So now we know how to get our resumes together now. So we've submitted those resumes and they are great. We stand out because we've used process, action, result. We've done that. So now we make it to the interview round. How do we prepare? And keeping in mind that interviews these days are a combination of being virtual. And then sometimes now some interviews are back to being in person. So Anthony, would love your perspective. What do you recommend students do to prepare for interviews?
Yeah, so preparing for an interview, I think is like very important. You need to, I think number one thing is doing your research on one, the company or the organization that you are interviewing for. Finding out what is the mission statement of the company, who are their partners, who are their clients that they're working with, what are some of the projects that they have been working on, so that you can also reference those things in your conversation, in your interview, and you're not walking in solely with no knowledge on the company or the organization. Other thing that I think is also very important, which is not, this isn't something that people tell you often, but doing research, if you can, and you know who the person is or people are that are interviewing you, finding them, doing a quick LinkedIn search, a quick Google search on this person who's interviewing you, also will help you stand out, because they'll know that you took the time beforehand to really know who they are and come in with that context as you're talking to them. But really the big thing is doing the research ahead of time. Like, organizations want to hear, and your questions afterhand, I know we're going to get to that, so I don't want to like preview something, but having conversation, having talking points about the company, about what they have done, and asking poignant questions about where do they see themselves going is the most important thing.
All right. So we've got our resume together. We know we need to do some research. Morgan, from your perspective, what are other things that we need to keep in mind to prepare for interviews and to do well in those interviews?
I think I just want to make a point, because I know that Prairie View has a large nursing base. And I think that it can be confusing, even if you're not going into nursing, if your future career path has a more relaxed attire once you get the job. It can be very confusing to know how to present yourself for an interview, whether it's in person or if it's virtual. But I want to make it clear that when you're going to an interview, always make sure you present your best self, and you always in business. I had several interviews for nursing, and even though I'm dressed like this right now to go to work after this call, I still wore a suit to my interview. So that's very important. So make sure you always know that no matter how you might dress once you get the job, your first impression for your interview is very, very important. And that's drastically different from how you may dress once you have attained the job. So that's very important to know and remember.
That's fantastic. So, all right, we're prepared for the interviews. We're dressed well, whether it's a virtual interview or in person. We go through the interview. We've done our research, as Anthony has said. So we get to the end of the interview, and this always tripped me up as a candidate. And now as somebody that interviews people, I promise you this is not a trick question. But the question of, do you have any questions? How should we answer that? Anthony, would love your perspective first on that.
Yeah, so similar, Jeff, I've now been in the position where I have started to hire both interns and full-time staff in my work. And that can make or break you standing out from another candidate if you have some type of question afterwards. That, like Jeff said, this is not a trick question. This is not something that we're just asking, or that the hiring agents are asking because they just wanted to give you some time to fill in. Like, they genuinely expect you to have some good questions to ask. So as I said earlier, asking poignant questions about the actual company, like based on your research, what are some of the projects that they're working on, their partners, asking questions about those things. But I would just give 3 questions that I think are very important at the end of an interview. Asking, so question 1 is this a new role or has it previously existed? I think that's very important, because coming into a job, you want to know if there's already some type of infrastructure support for this role, or am I basically coming in to be like a test dummy, for lack of better terms? There never been anyone in this role trying this out? And that's also a power position, because you get to do a lot if there hasn't been anyone in that role before. Who are the main people within the company or departments that you would be collaborating with in your daily work? And then third question is, asking the person where do they see the company in the next 3 to 5 years, and also where do they see the person that they're hiring for this position in the next 3 to 5 years. That's a good way to find out if there is any growth opportunity within this position that you're interviewing for, and also a good way to let them know, like, you care about the long term. You're already thinking about the long term, both of the company and in your position as well.
Awesome. We're getting all the gems. I hope everyone is taking notes. So we know how to get through the non-trick question. So we made it to the stage when we get an offer. Morgan, do we just accept the offer? Like, as soon as they send the email to say offer, do we just say yes, yes, yes? Or are there things that we need to consider before we accept the offer?
So when you're trying to find a job, it's normal to interview for different positions at different companies. I think it's fine to accept an offer, but the kicker is how you respond if you get a better offer after you've already accepted one. So it's important to always remain professional and make sure you backtrack to the first offer that you accepted, because you never know if you need to work at that company again, or that person can get you a job somewhere else, because networking is key. And so for me personally, I interviewed for several nursing jobs, and I did accept one initially, and I ended up getting a better one later on. And so it was very important for me to make a phone call to the person who offered me the job, to just let them know how thankful I was for the opportunity, and to explain that I thought that I received a better opportunity for me to start off as a new nurse. And I think that was very well respected, because some people don't take a chance to say thank you or explain why they decided to move on to a different offer. And I think for that reason, if I ever were to need a job at that particular company, I would be welcome. And so I think it's important to always send a follow-up email or a phone call, whatever you feel like you need to do, to not burn bridges and make sure you remain professional. And I think employers understand. You interview for different companies, you get better offers, but you always want to let them know and not just leave it open, because you never know who you'll meet in the future.
Reputation is important. We do have a question from the audience, and Lauren, I'm going to turn this to you. Now, you all have in some way switched careers, or you are in careers that did not necessarily track from what you studied in school. But Lauren, from your perspective as being on both sides, oftentimes internships will allude to some sort of requirements for experience, or at least exposure to a certain topic. But if you're a student that has either switched majors or you're switching career interests, how do you recommend people approach that when they may not on paper have that experience that the internship calls for, but they are really interested in the role?
Yeah, definitely. And this one is definitely very near and dear to my heart, because I am going through a career pivot right now. But if you don't have the experience, there are a couple of different things you can do. I do want to preface by saying internships, the people that are hiring you oftentimes know that you won't have that experience. But if you are coming up on some barriers and people that's just not working out for you, there are definitely some things that you can do. I know for me in particular, being a sociology major, it was really hard to find internships just because people don't see the link between sociology and the corporate world. And I would say for that, something that really helped me was figuring out how to tailor my experience to the job description. So even though I didn't have the experience that they're looking for, there are definitely things that are similar that you could possibly fall back on. So that was something that was really key for me. I would also say certificates. So if you're aware, LinkedIn Learning has a huge platform where you can take all different types of courses and gain certificates and put them on your resume and your LinkedIn profile. That was something that I definitely leveraged. That way I could get that experience. And so I would highly recommend that you take advantage of those opportunities that they're made available to you. And then ultimately networking. That was something that was huge for me. It was really important to be able to reach out to a recruiter and say, hey, I applied for this role. Would you have 10 or 15 minutes on your calendar next week to discuss it with me? I was able to leverage those opportunities, and it allowed me to really speak to my experience and who I was and what I had to offer in a way that my resume couldn't. And that oftentimes helps people kind of bridge the gap. So I would definitely suggest you do that. And then there are virtual internships that you can do. There is a website, I'm blanking on what it's called right now, but I can share it with you after the call. But it's a really great way for you to virtually intern at some major companies, and you're able to put that experience on your resume, and that's free as well.
Anybody else want to chime in?
I will. I want to note that it can be discouraging if you feel like you don't have enough experience to apply for a job. But I also want to make it known that you can always still apply, and you can always still get an interview, and you can always still get a job. I'm a new grad nurse in a specialty. You're supposed to have experience to have this job, but it's my first nursing job. So never be afraid to, stick your leg out and trust yourself. You never know who's going to interview you. So don't be afraid to apply for something just because the description says you need experience, because you never know what can happen.
All right. Well, thank you, panelists, for those wonderful tips and tools for our students. So now that you have the job, you've accepted the offer, now you have to show up the first day. And so we're going to talk about developing a professional presence in our internships and our first-time full-time jobs. And so first, the question is for Lauren. How should students show up and how should they prepare their professional presence in their internship experiences?
Yeah, I feel like professional presence can encompass a lot of different things. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're showing up to work in professional attire. That's very important. But for me in particular, during my internship, one of the ways that I kind of developed that professional presence was making sure that I was reaching out to people on other teams. And so obviously in an internship, you'll have that face-to-face interaction with your manager and your team members, but it's also really important to make sure that you're developing those relationships outside of your team. And so for me, what that looked like was sending emails to people on other teams, asking if they would be open to having lunch or if they would be open to doing like a 10 or 15-minute coffee chat. And that's a really great way to network, learn a little bit more about what people do at the company and kind of learning a little bit more about how they got to where they are in their careers. And you never know, something that they are actually doing right now, you might be interested in, and you're able to kind of pivot in that direction. So that's one way in particular that I really focused on developing that presence. And it really also shows to your manager as well as the other people in the company that you're taking your internship seriously.
That is a great point, Lauren. Thank you for that. Morgan, you're in a different industry, and so healthcare is very different. How do you develop that professional presence in the healthcare industry, and what tips would you give to our young people attending the event tonight?
I think for the healthcare industry, it's important to never sit idle because there's so many things that can be done. And so I think when there's a time to say, can I help you do this? Or what can I do next? Always take that opportunity and that extra step. I think that really helped me when I was doing internships up until graduation. I never sat idle. There can be a lot of downtime in the healthcare industry, give or take, but I always tried to make sure I was doing something. So I looked proactive and like a hard worker. And I think that's very important in our industry.
Thank you for sharing that. And so, Anthony, you've been in an array of different internship experiences and now full-time offers. How do you recommend students manage the cultural differences in workplaces and kind of those unwritten rules that no one tells us about when we start as an intern or as a entry-level position?
Yeah, I think so. The first thing is like, you'll always hear like be professional, but I think professional is very much so, the term professional is very much so whitewash, and it's based on what white America deems as professional. And so I think it's more so, as Ivana's question says, it's more so learning how to navigate the cultural differences at your job and understanding that, you know, a lot of people come from different walks of lives, and most of the times we are going to be the younger people working an internship or in an entry-level role. And so I think the most important piece is finding some type of mentor to help you kind of navigate the space that is your new company, to help you learn those different cultural differences, so that you can quickly kind of learn how to navigate the spaces, but also know how to be yourself. If I can use a story as an example really quickly, my first job working on a campaign, I went down to Alabama in 2017 and happened to be working on a campaign that was predominantly made up of white staff who had been there for over a year working on the campaign, and I came in the last 3 weeks. And so there was a lot of resentment towards me and just like, who does this kid think he is? But I then learned that because these people have been working on this campaign for over a year, it wasn't a racial thing, which I immediately chalked it up to. And so understanding that and not being, you know, so on the defensive, that you know that like there are just going to be cultural differences, and there are people in the workplace who have good intentions, but they may offend you, they may come off the wrong way because of those cultural differences. But trying to look beyond that, assuming best intentions and trying to figure out like, where is this coming from? What's the root of this? Is the best way to try to navigate those cultural differences.
No, I think those are great points. Everyone has a different experience. There will be unwritten rules. There are unwritten rules at every company and every organization. And so you have to find that mentor, person that can advocate for you and that can help you navigate these new experiences, both as an intern, but also as full-time student or full-time employee. All right, so now we're talking about social media presence. social media is a prominent part of our culture. Most of our students, or probably all of our students on this event, have some type of social media profile. And so how would you recommend students manage those profiles? Should they be private? Should our students filter what they're putting on social media? I'm going to start with Lauren as our talent acquisition person. What do you recommend students do?
Yeah, I just want to first go to your first point just about managing your professional presence. Something that people don't realize often, but LinkedIn is also social media, and I would highly recommend that everybody has an optimized LinkedIn profile that they can use. It's a really great way to get your name out there, and oftentimes recruiters will reach out to you about opportunities on that platform. But in terms of like what you're posting online and whether or not you should keep your social media page private or not, I would say just make sure that you're being cautious of what you're putting out there. If you wouldn't, like, it's overset, but if you wouldn't want your mom or your grandmother looking at it, like, you shouldn't post it. So definitely realize that like the internet is forever. And even if you go ahead and delete something on somebody's server, it's there. Somebody's taken a screenshot, it's there. Somebody has access to it. So just make sure that you're being cautious of that. In terms of whether or not you should keep your social media pages public or private, I would say it's a personal thing to kind of come to a decision on. It's really up to you. I would say I would personally just keep it private if it were me, just because you never know who's looking you up. You don't know if your manager's looking you up. You don't know if your coworkers are looking you up, or whether or not somebody at a potential employer is trying to figure out who you are. So I would really just implore you to keep it private if you can. But once again, it's a personal decision.
Thank you, Lauren. And I would also just put a nugget there. internX does have a LinkedIn learning management system course. So if you're trying to build your LinkedIn profile and learn what things should be on your LinkedIn, make sure you take a look at the learning management system on internX. It'll help you build that profile in an efficient way to get you noticed by hiring managers. And Morgan, any notes that you may have for students on their social media presence?
I wanted to make a note because since I graduated from nursing school, I've begun this transition of trying to be a nurse influencer. So with that territory comes a fine line with social media, because while I am posting nursing content, I never post at work. So there are like certain things you should and shouldn't do. Like Lauren said, I always, before I even started doing the nursing influence, I always use a rule of thumb. If I don't want my mom to see this, it's not going to be posted. So obviously my page is public since I'm trying to go that route, but always remember that there are still boundaries to posting things on social media, no matter what you're trying to do. Since my page is public and it's growing, I have no idea if my coworkers look at what I'm posting. I have no idea if my managers look at what I'm posting. There can be like a numerous amount of followers in a day, and I don't have time to filter who's following me or not. So it's important to always make sure you're not compromising your workplace and what you're posting on social media. Sometimes I think people think in the nursing world, you can, make videos at your workplace, but that can also get you in trouble. So while that might be cute, I never do that. So just try to make sure you figure out what's best for you. Employers always have policies, so make sure you look over that as well. You never want to overstep and do things that you're not supposed to do as it regards to social media. But I think that it's okay if you're trying to go a certain route for it to be public, but you have to be very, very careful because you never know who's watching.
No, thank you for sharing that. We truly appreciate everyone's thoughts on the social media presence. I think it's definitely a provocative question. And so definitely read your policy in your company. Every company and employer has a policy. And so please be mindful of that policy. We do have a question in the chat from the student. And so we do want to get this question from one of the students. And so this student, and Lauren, you may be the best person to answer, but anyone else, please feel free to chime in. The student has a full-time position post-graduation, so they are graduating this year, but they also have an interest in continuing their academic success, so either going to grad school or continuing education beyond undergrad. And so any advice you have on how to manage a full-time role in addition to managing being in school?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to this. My situation was similar, but a little different. But after my internship, the summer after my junior year of college, I actually received a full-time offer. So I was working full-time while also finishing my senior year. And it's definitely an uphill battle. Not only are you getting acclimated to leaving your school and like dealing with all the stuff that comes along with that, but you're also learning how to work in the corporate world, if maybe that's what you were doing, and learning kind of how to balance the intricacies that are involved with that. So it's definitely really difficult for me in particular. It started with first and foremost taking care of myself, because if I wasn't okay, it didn't matter what I did. Nothing in my school life or in my career was going to be okay. And so that was my first priority. My second priority was making sure that I was communicating with my professors as well as my managers, saying, hey, I'm balancing both. That way they're aware and that way they can work with you. So I would definitely recommend that you do that, and just making sure that you're staying organized, that you're on track with your deliverables. Any meetings that you have is going to be really important to making sure that you kind of make it out of there alive. But yeah, that's definitely what I would recommend.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, so we've made it through the developing and professional presence, and thank you for the students and at putting their questions in the chat. Just a reminder, continue to put any questions that you have for the panel in the chat, and we'll make sure that the panel has an opportunity to answer those questions. Now we're gonna move on to the session around excelling on the job. We're gonna bring Jeff back up to the stage, and he's gonna walk through the excelling on the job questions.
Yes. So how do we excel on the job? One of the important things, Anthony, you mentioned this earlier, is networking. You mentioned how networking at an HBCU is important to getting a job. And it stands to reason that once you get that job, that same skill is important. So Anthony, can you give us any tips on how we can use networking to not only do well at work, but advance and continue our career?
Yes. So I think it's great that pretty much all of these things are building on each other. Like, I feel like my answer to this definitely relates back to the earlier answer about networking on campus, but also finding that mentor. I think like finding a mentor is not easy within your workspace, and it does take networking. Just because someone has been at the job and may look like you or have similar experiences does not make them a good mentor. You have to really like see how they move in the workspace, and also, from your networking, have conversations with other people who may not look like you, but may be more willing to be a mentor or may have some good advice. So networking within your industry at your job is one piece, but I think one thing that is also important is making sure that you're networking within your industry outside of your job. There are always going to be better and more opportunities for you all bright, gifted Black people, and so continuing to like widen and broaden your professional network is always going to be helpful. And we've talked about LinkedIn a few times. One thing that I think is great to do on LinkedIn is doing research on people who are in your field. If there are companies or organizations that you look up to or that you aspire to be working at, making those connections, making those social connections on LinkedIn is helpful. Because people want to help younger people a lot of times, and so just putting yourself out there and like making yourself available as someone who wants to network and is looking for new networks is always going to be an invaluable opportunity for you.
That's great advice. And a big part of networking is being able to sell yourself. And for me, I remember the challenge in doing that was dealing with something called imposter syndrome. I don't know if anybody in the audience today has ever experienced that, but Morgan, we'll start with you and then kick it over to Lauren. Have you ever had to deal with imposter syndrome? If so, how did you deal with it? What recommendations do you have?
I feel like in nursing school, I definitely dealt with imposter syndrome. Nursing school was not an easy road for me. I think that sometimes you compare yourself to people while you're matriculating, and you can feel like, how did I get here? Am I supposed to be here? And so I think it's important to always check yourself in those moments, because you wouldn't be there if you weren't supposed to be there. You would have never gotten accepted if that wasn't where you're supposed to be. And I think even as a nurse now, like sometimes when I go into work as a new nurse, I like get imposter syndrome. There are a lot of older nurses who have been doing things for years and years, and they do things so seamlessly and so easy. And I can kind of feel like, I don't know how to do that like them. Am I ever going to be able to do that way? But it's important to just trust yourself and trust your process. Take your time with yourself, be patient with yourself, And just trust that you are going to get where you're supposed to be in due time. I mean, imposter syndrome is, I think it's hard to say that you will never experience it because you like challenge yourself and always want to be better. So I think that it's a fair thing to feel, but always try to like check yourself and combat it. And that's what I do every single day.
Awesome. Lauren, we'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I've definitely dealt with imposter syndrome back at my previous employer. I was fresh out of college and I was leading the entire company's North American internship program. So there was definitely a lot of feelings that came along with that, feeling like I didn't deserve the position that I was in my career so early on. And then obviously now being a grad student, transitioning over from an HBCU to a PWI, there's definitely been times where I just didn't feel like I belonged or that I deserved the opportunities or the positions that I was in. And so I would say the biggest thing with feeling like an imposter is just really being in your head. And that can definitely be a really tough thing to deal with sometimes. But I found success for me personally in creating a brag sheet. And so if you don't know what a brag sheet is, it's basically a central document that you can write down like all your accomplishments and your achievements or some of the kudos people on your team members have given you. And it's a really great way to kind of pick your mood up and make you feel better and remind you that you do deserve where you are. And that all the things that you've done in life hasn't come easy and you've put in the work. And so the benefits are twofold because obviously you can look at it and feel better about yourself, but also it's a really great document to draw back on when you are sprucing up your resume or optimizing your LinkedIn profile, or if you're getting ready to interview for a role. It's a really great way to look back and have some accomplishments that you can speak to.
This is great content. I really hope everybody's taking notes. I am. I'm typing some notes over here as well. And I'll just add the leadership of InternX and the Fund2 Foundation, Robert F. Smith and Linda Wilson. Some of you all may have heard of those names. They often say, you are enough. And so I just want to drill that point home to add on to what our panelists have said. You are enough. Imposter syndrome is real. But get a handle on it, and I think Anthony, Morgan, and Lauren have given some great tips on how to do that. And so as we wrap up the panel, I've got one last question. So you all have dropped a tremendous number of gems, and I thank you all so much for sharing this knowledge. If you could go back and envision yourself when you were on campus, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice in hindsight, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself? And we'll start with Anthony, then we'll go to Lauren, and then we'll finish off with Morgan.
Yes, if I could go back and have a conversation with myself on campus, I would focus on just telling myself to, one, start earlier. I know that, like, for me personally, at my time at Morehouse, I spent a lot of time like being social, being out, excelled in the classroom, did well in class. I crossed the fraternity while I was there. But a lot of that was just like social things or, in the classroom, which is great, but it didn't prepare me for the workforce in the way that I needed to be. And so I would just say to myself, like, start earlier, start applying for internships your freshman year, try and get internships your freshman year. And also like the networking piece that I've said a few points on this evening, just taking better advantage of that. As you said, Jeff, like being willing and able to sell yourself and being confident, as both Lauren and Morgan said, in your own ability, that, even as a freshman, even as a sophomore on a college campus, you bring something, you are unique and you are blessed. And so like just knowing and being willing to put yourself out there earlier would be my main advice to myself.
Yeah, mine is also kind of similar to Anthony's. I wish that I had started earlier. Nowadays, companies in their internship programs are starting much earlier. So for a lot of people, like internship applications open up in August. And so that's really the optimal time to be making sure that you're applying, because as you wait, more people apply, and then just the chance of your resume being seen starts to dwindle. So if you can start early, definitely do that. I know for me in particular, like watching all of my friends get internships and me not having anything was definitely was a little bit disappointing. So if I could have started earlier, that would have been great. Especially just given the fact that if you do start late, like that's fine, but just keep in mind that you potentially just might not find the opportunity that you're looking for. So save yourself the headache and start earlier. And then I would also say just being aware that opportunities aren't going to fall into your lap. So 9 out of 10 times an opportunity just isn't going to be given to you. You have to be proactive and go out there and work for it. And I know Anthony's been talking a little bit more about networking, but that's really important to do. And if you want something, you got to go out there and chase it.
I think I would tell myself to be a little bit less of a social butterfly. I crossed the sorority. I was on the dance team. I feel like I was just doing a lot of things. My grades weren't terrible, but I definitely don't think they were up to par on where they could have been if I wasn't so social. I think that caused me to have to catch up a lot in my senior year, which kind of caused a lot of stress when it came to applying for professional schools. So I would say it's okay to be social. We go to HBCUs, you know, that's one of the greatest gifts of it, but also be proactive because you have a life after graduation, after your HBCU experience is over. So make sure you stay up on your grades, especially when it comes to applying to professional schools or graduate schools after graduation. Grades are really important in that aspect. And you don't want to have to catch up and be stressed at the end, which is what I had to do. So that's the advice I would give myself.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of you all. We are our great panelists, Anthony, Lauren, and Morgan. You all have just been a joy to chat with, and I've learned so much from you all, and I'm sure our audience has as well. So I want to give you all a kind of virtual clap, and I hope everybody that is watching is joining us and doing the same thing. So thank you so much for being here. Ivana, I'm going to turn it back over to you to give some concluding thoughts and wrap it up.
All right. Well, thank you again to our panel. This was an outstanding event. Thanks to you all. And so we truly appreciate everything that you've shared. I'll make a couple notes. Anthony said start early. InternX allows you to apply for internships as early as your freshman year. And so actually we have over hundreds of internships already on the platform. Lauren was correct. Companies start to hire as early as August. And so we've had summer 2020 internships on the platform since August. So please get on, make sure you update your resume and get your profile completed so that you can apply for those internships. Lauren also made an important point about certifications. You can also receive certifications on InternX. And so you can be certified in IT, Salesforce, Cisco. You can get some soft skill training if you need some resume building. You can also have some training around how you prepare for interviews. And so everything that we talked about tonight, there are more resources at internx.org/PVAMU. As a Prairie View student, you have access to the InternX platform, both the career readiness training as well as the internships. I can't stress enough how important the internships are going to be for you as you transition through your college experience. The last thing I'll note is that we do have some tips or tools that we want to share with you. If there are any questions, please feel free to put the questions in the chat. But if you have questions specifically for the panel, please feel free to put them in the chat. The panel is still around. But we're going to share kind of a tips or tricks tool sheet that we'll pull up. And so Anthony shared this. Make sure you're researching the company and the interviewers before you go to your interview. That's so important. Make sure you dress professionally. That's also very important. As Morgan said, even if you're going in for a nursing interview, it's an industry where you get to wear scrubs, but for that interview, you should definitely be professionally dressed. Arrive early, even for virtual interviews. And so if you are in a virtual interview, you should be there early. Make sure you check all of your tech and make sure your lighting and everything is going well. Use the STAR method or the PAR method that Lauren included in her notes. So make sure that you're always talking about the situation that you were in, the task that you completed, the actions that you may have taken, and the results of those actions so that the employer can see how you're able to work in real time. And as Anthony, Lauren, and Morgan mentioned, thank you notes, they are so important. We have so many students that we interview, and having the opportunity to receive a thank you note definitely sets you apart. I can tell you that all of our students that we've hired through InternX, when they send a thank you note, they definitely get put at the top of the pile. And so please feel free to take a screenshot of this and make sure you get this written down. But again, the InternX platform has all of this information for you. And again, it's internX.org/PVAMU. As a Prairie View student, you have direct access to all of the tips and tricks you're going to need to get to land that internship or full-time offer. We'll now move on to the next slide. internX partner Student Freedom Initiative and Jane Street have joined forces to offer the Focus program. It's an exclusive opportunity for HBCU students. Jane Street is one of the largest trading firms in the US. The Focus program will give you an overview of the trading world. We know this generation more than ever is interested in how do you manage stocks and things of that nature. This opportunity will give you the chance to learn more about trading, software development, and business development at Jane Street. And so please take a screenshot of this screen. If you need more information, please go to internX.org. Or there's also a link in the chat that the internX team is also putting in the chat for you. So please register. This is a free event. They're going to have amazing information, and this is from freshmen to juniors. And so anyone from your freshman year into your junior year is eligible to participate as a Prairie View student. And so please, there's also a QR code. And so if you want to grab your phone and scan the QR code, you can get access to register, but please register for this event because it's very important. And last but not least, thank you all for your time. Thank you all for the opportunity to participate in this internX session. Please feel free to stay in the chat and ask any questions. The internX team is in the chat answering questions for the next 5 minutes. Some of the panelists are also still in the chat answering questions. Again, I can't stress enough the importance of registering for internX.org /PVAMU. As a Prairie View student, we have all of the resources you will need to be successful in any internship. And we'll continue to work with the Career Service team to host amazing events like this. We hope you all enjoyed this event, and we'll see you again soon.